Welcome to Making the Grade, the podcast that explores what's driving the decline in graduation rates between funding rounds and what it really takes to scale a venture-backed software startup successfully with realistic options to exit. I'm Tom Glasson, CEO at Scalewise, and each week I'm going to be joined by founders, investors, and some of the best go-to-market leaders in the world to unpack the strategies, the missteps, and the mindset shifts that separate those who graduate from those who don't. Expect real talk, actionable go-to-market insights, and honest stories that will help you scale more wisely and thrive in an increasingly competitive market. Because there is a smarter way to scale, and we're here to uncover it. What does it take to build a category-defining SaaS company when your biggest competitors have raised 40 times more funding than you? In this episode, I'm joined by my good friend and founder and CEO of Jiminny, Tom Lavery. For those that don't know Jiminny, they're a revenue intelligence platform that's been quietly building one of the most resilient and respected brands in this space. I've had the pleasure of knowing Tom for nearly a decade now, so it felt extra special to welcome him to Making the Grade to share his story. And after scaling Reward Gateway through multiple private equity exits, Tom bootstrapped Jiminny for years before taking on funding, all while going head-to-head with some of the most well-capitalized players in the market. Together with Munyahoto, we discussed tactical ways to scale in a capital-efficient way, the fundamental changes we've seen in go-to-market and sales over the years, and how founders can embrace AI without falling into the hype and over-engineering their go-to-market. If you're feeling the pressure to fundraise, expand, or overhaul your go-to-market engine, this episode is packed with pragmatic advice from someone who's seen both sides of the journey. So let's jump in. Tom, welcome to Making the Grade. How are you today, my friend?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks, Tom. Good to see you. Nice to see you, Munya.
Yeah, good to see you, Tom.
Good. Well, before we dive into the questions, I just want to say that I've had the pleasure of knowing Tom for, I think, nearly a decade now, mate. And over the years, I've kind of seen your journey from scaling Reward Gateway, or certainly the back end of that, to then building Jiminny from scratch. And I'm genuinely excited to explore that journey that you've been on in a bit more detail. So maybe just to start us off, can you just give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of your career to date, and maybe just take us on that journey that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I think I was writing a sales blog and you followed it. That's how we met. Almost like a version of online dating, really, Tom. There you go. So, sort of bro love there. But for me, it started in sales, didn't go to uni, and started selling in health clubs randomly. But, quickly got into sales management and then got into B2B in very, very early 20s, Raw Gateway. Obviously, very lucky, went through multiple exits, very early stage of what people now call SaaS and tech, right? And that company went on to sell to Edenred for $1 billion. It's an amazing business, still an amazing business today. And yeah, spent the last 8 or 9 years kind of building Jiminny from the ground up. And that was solving a problem that I saw at Raw Gateway, which is really like, same Tom, you felt that challenge at the time, really. It's like getting visibility of performance, understanding what's going on, being able to coach at scale. There's a passion of mine to kind of fix that with Shelley, James and the team. And here we are, nearly 20 years doing all this.
And I do remember those early days of Jiminny really, really well. You were kind of in a bit of a new category at the time. And I think you were fighting hard just to win those first few customers. And I think I actually might have been maybe your second or maybe your third customer when I was at Brightpearl. And obviously now you're fast forwarding, what's been 7-8 years. Many of our listeners, I'm sure, have heard of Jiminny, but may not fully understand kind of the origin story and the problem that you set out to solve. And I suppose just given the explosion of sales tools out there, I'm curious about how you have found your niche or found your lane. Where did the idea come from? And how does it work? And really, who is it for? Because you can't serve everyone. So yeah, give us a bit more of a sense as to where the idea came from, what does it actually do, and then who is it for?
If I take a very step back, I built it for Reward Gateway. So what that was kind of helpful in a way is really going, well, here's a scaling tech company that started off with a few salespeople, now has a few hundred. It was helpful really to go, well, we focus on SMB and mid-market. I was never the, CRO or SVP of sales for IBM. I don't know what that's like, right? So it kind of was a bit natural in terms of how we're building it for that market. But like anything, it evolves. What's the core feature in one point? Your core functionality evolves over time. So in the very early days, we were just worried about capturing the conversation. You literally couldn't see everything in one place. But, hindsight's a great thing. We bootstrapped and took a very limited amount of money and then even took growth equity. I actually did a bit of analysis a little while ago, and now this category's evolved from like call recording to conversation intelligence to revenue intelligence in terms of which bucket you're in. But we're bottom of the league table on funding. So, and I think the nearest person to us has 7 times more funding. And the top of the tree, I'm sure who they are, is 42 times more funding. So some days I think I beat myself up about things. And then I think, fucking hell, we're still around. It's probably a pretty big achievement. Yeah. I kind of think of it as like Norwich playing in the Champions League or something like that. It's probably the equivalent of how we got there. But, you do need a lot of go-to-market dollars in this space. That is the challenge.
Tom, that's a fascinating kind of journey that you've been on. I've always been a big fan of Jiminny from kind of the sidelines, and I am fascinated by your fundraising strategy and approach. You bootstrapped Jiminny for quite a while before fundraising. Can you share a bit about how you approached building the business in the early days and why you eventually kind of came to that point where you decided to fundraise?
Look, I didn't know any other way. Raw Gateway, even though it did private equity deals, it was very lean and had EBITDA from day one. So it's kind of like the way that I was taught or grew up how to do it. I did have a feeling that there was not many people, let's call it the Salesforce ecosystem, right? There's not many companies that pop out the top, not $1 billion valuation, actually getting to $1 billion of revenue. So it's not that we didn't believe, it was just like, well, how big could we actually ever get in reality solving this problem or challenge? So it might sound a little bit not negative, but like conservative maybe, and like everyone brings their business thinking it's going to be the next Apple or whatever. That's not always the reality. Sometimes you do it for a different reason. So I think we just took a pragmatic approach to kind of doing it. At the same time, I don't think there's any like right or wrong, because sometimes you've got to be first, or you've got to spend a lot of money. You have to build hardware or spend lots on marketing. So not saying that's right, but the one thing I will say is if you can keep it self-funded or a small amount of funded, as long as you can, you keep as much control as you can, you stay in the black as much as you can, you give yourself a lot more choices, and you're not chasing your tail as much, and you can stay more focused. So, again, that would be always my bit of advice to another founder. If you can do it that way, that's always the way to remain control and remain profitable. But it's not always easy. It depends on the industry and the vertical, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think there's, in many ways, people see that competitive tension as a problem to solve. But I think you're absolutely right that it's a tension to manage. You've got these two opposing forces where you want to keep the business lean and agile and manageable from an expenditure perspective, but you also want to stay in the game. You don't want to be outspent by the freshly minted investment from some tier one that's basically buying all the customers for a certain amount of money. So with that in mind, when you finally got to that stage of, we're going to need to fund the business, with external capital, how did you approach it? And what were your biggest learnings from that experience?
We're quite lucky because our space was a growing space. So we had a lot of inbound opportunity, like people coming to us. So you just manage and nurture those relationships over time and make sure that you speak to people. I do think it's a bit like any sort of process. You've got to qualify out and in because your time's precious. So you don't want to be necessarily speaking to the wrong people. So like, what sort of funding model do you have? What's your check size? Like, I wouldn't be scared to like ask that on the first email to someone who comes to you. As long as you do it in a polite way, you don't want to waste their time or yours. If their kind of expectations, funding model and check size isn't right, then he's going to waste each other's time. So I was quite strict with that, making sure we were kind of fishing in the right pond, and then just working with the right companies to narrow it down to 3 or 4 people. At the end of the day, the most oddest thing I think someone described this to me brilliant is you are getting married, but you're getting divorced. That is what it is like with an investor. It's odd, right? So you have to be aligned. And if you are then not aligned, that's where it goes a bit Pete Tong. So I think, that alignment is really important. So like Kennett, for example, they go for bootstrapped companies. So they know they're bootstrapped. They have to be at 3 million. So they know there's been some strain there before. They look to capitalize them, sometimes give secondary and things like that to help the founders because they've been working hard for a long time. And then what they then look is for a 3 times multiple on their return. Not anything insane, not anything crazy, but for a reasonable return from a bootstrap company getting to next stage or multiple stages. So I think that alignment in terms of what you think's achievable and what they think's achievable is really key.
Tom, how much of your decision to take that Series A in 2022 was about what you talked about earlier, which is that you had these really well capitalized competitors that were raising a lot of money? Did you feel the pressure to be right? I better do this, or what was the tipping point for you to decide to move from bootstrap to getting some funding?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more years than not that we're always running out of money or borrowing debt or doing things. So I'm not an expert at staying in the black, but yeah, I think, I just felt that if we were going to compete long term, now was the right time. I think, we had a lot of what I'd call early adopters, people that believed in the vision, but that can only get you so far. When you get into hundreds of customers, it needs to absolutely be being reliable and robust. So like if I look at the Kennet money, like I wouldn't say loads of it's gone on go to market. A vast majority of it has gone on, X company I was just speaking to this week swapped us out for one of the most highly funded competitors. And I know that all the core functionality, the reliability, the speed of everything, the failure rate will be the same, and that for us, we had to do that to stay competitive. So that was a big driver more than anything. Like, can we double down on R&D and make sure that, the product can go to the next level?
And of course, that capital comes with expectation, whether that be from investors or kind of the team itself. And, we often hear these stories of the upside of funding and, the triple digit growth and the amazing company parties, but we don't necessarily hear about the harder parts of that. Has there been any complications or challenges that the fundraise that you've done has created for you?
Yeah, I mean, you could say I took money at the best time or the worst time. Depends what you want to do. It's really you look at it. So August 2020, I'm going my years now. Was it end of 2022? I think we did the first investment. I was away in Florida on holiday and I was doing calls like you do. We had a few new starters and I could see we have what a revenue line like user expansion. So it's where people are organically adding on versus upsell or new business. And I could see it freaking fell off a cliff in the September or the October. Like just people were not adding users. So you could see like SMB and mid-market. That's always a sign. Now it's up reasonable levels again or back to levels of 2022. So you can tell how the market's performing. But yeah, that fell off a cliff. And then, the kind of whole SaaS market had a bit of a downturn. I'd say it went into a sort of SaaS recession for 2 years, if you want to label it that. But yeah, the chat that definitely they're kind of resizing the business because we had all these plans based on these growth rates that we'd seen for the last 2 or 3 years. And then suddenly you have to shift gears and kind of adapt really. So yeah, I think a lot of people would tell you the same story. It's been an interesting couple of years where everyone's understanding what normal looks like in terms of NRR, GRR, getting all growth rates depending on your stage. I think it's all kind of moved.
I mean, there's so much to choose from here based on what you just said, but if you had to pick your biggest career highlight on this journey that you've been on and your biggest lesson learned, what would be the 2 standout things that you would call out?
I believe that everyone has their own political views and, what they do. But part of running a company is that you are giving back to the economy, that you are paying taxes, you're, producing GDP. And I think at Raw Gateway, there was like 8 of us in a little office and then it had hundreds of employees. And, I left and when Glenn left and people have a career and that was from nothing. So I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that this company was on the brink of almost not working out, classic startup. And we turned it into something amazing and loads of people, it changed their life really. It changed their career. People coming from different industries, gave so much back to the economy. And even same with Jiminny, a different scale, had loads of people go on and do different things in their life and their career. And also, we do our bit for the economy. So it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I do think of it as like, it's not so much about the valuation or the end result. It's like what you're doing along the journey. So that would be my probably biggest, proudest achievement.
And biggest lesson?
I think generally is like, just run your own race, and I learned this the hard way. I'm fine now, but in the very early days of Jiminny, I was so obsessed with being number one, so obsessed with beating the competition. And it makes you make poor decisions. So if I could give one bit of advice to anyone starting business, is like, think, oh gosh, got to do this month. Like, that in the grand scheme of things move quick, but they don't move that quick. So just having that little bit of patience, not to the point of which you're slow or you don't make decisions quickly, because I think that's what makes a good founder and entrepreneur, but just be that little bit more thoughtful and kind of like how you run your own race,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Tom. And want to maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about craft of sales. Over the last decade, there's been, I think it's all fair to say, like a seismic shift in how buyers engage and even what great sales leadership looks like and what a great tech stack looks like. You've seen that evolution firsthand, and you're kind of part of that evolution as it relates to the tech stack. But thinking more broadly, what are some of the biggest changes in sales that you've seen over your career?
Yeah, there's collision of things, really. I think probably the two things that I look back over the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years fundamentally has changed is you can see everything now better. I'm not saying we solved those problems, but like if you talk about what we do, every conversation, every interaction is being analyzed. Of course, it can be done better, automated better, analyzed better. And then the other time, you've got this kind of post-COVID sort of thing where the buyer enablement's more important. So I think, Tom, we were at an event together, actually. It was the Get Accept thing. And the guy said, salespeople don't close deals, the buyer does. Yeah, the amount of control that a salesperson has, it's almost like how you're running the project now and how you're involving everyone when you're not there, all the things that you're doing. I mean, sales has always been about being consistent. But like if you aren't creating those videos for other stakeholders, if you haven't got a deal room, if you're not making sure that people are engaging in content in the right way at the right times, like I think it's very hard to win slightly bigger mid-market or enterprise deals, So yeah, two things for me, definitely the whole kind of visibility, intelligence stuff that we do and what you do outside of the sales process, because the buyer experience has changed. I mean, we've done RFPs and we're like, we come see you and they'll be, oh no, Barbara's here and Alan's there, so we'll just get on a Zoom. And you're like, you can't fight it. Like, this is very hard. Like you try and drive in person, do the odd in person, but fundamentally you have to be very good in 2D and virtual, and that takes a lot more effort.
And just a quick follow-up as well, Tom. What changes do you think are here to stay and which might swing back in the other direction? Or do you feel like we're on a path now that, we're not going to get off? Or are there things that you feel like may change again?
I think a few things will go full circle. So like, do you need the whole SDR and AE thing? Probably not, because you can automate way more. So do you just have a lot more automation and self-gen going on, and you do go back to end to end, in terms of sales? Talking to someone else at a Pavilion breakfast this week, no one knows how to sell in 2026, 2027. Doesn't matter how much experience you've got. I think everyone's confused about how much AI they bring into their go-to-market engine or not. So it's a really, it's a really challenging time to go, how much do I keep doing what I know that works? And is that going to keep working versus what do I want to change? And how do I know that's going to impact? So classic thing for me is if you kind of focus, I think it's like the Google model, isn't it? Like 70% on execution, 20% on tactical stuff, and then 10% on innovation. Like if you're sitting there as a leader or manager of a team, you can't be distracted by it all the time, but you've got to be investing enough time to make tweaks and changes. But yeah, it's not easy. I don't think anyone's got it nailed down or know exactly what's happening. I think the whole AI thing is like, not saying there's going to be a .com bubble. It might just power through that, but it's very early. It's like the early stages of the internet, isn't it? It's like the whole, another revolution of the wheel, through like the internet and then the cloud and big data, and now we've got AI.
Yeah, Tom, I mean, this is really important, I feel. The change and the shift in just methodology and approach, as you say, was necessary and is now permanent. We're never going to go back to the old world, whatever that was. But I speak to my founders and my CEOs, on a weekly basis, and they're facing this really bizarre tension where they have some things about their process that work. That's how they got to where they are right now. But they're inundated with examples of companies that are saving 80% on cost, that are able to halve their teams because AI is now doing everything from drafting copy to writing emails to calling people and following up and all of that. And there is this decision paralysis around the allure is actually most times, how much money can I save? The suspicion is, what if it doesn't work and I've let go of all of these really good people who have got training and knowledge and understanding and experience, sector knowledge. And if I don't invest, I'm going to be carrying more cost burden than everybody else that I'm competing against. If I do adopt this new wave or this new world and it doesn't work, I'm behind by a year or two because I let go of the talent that is going to be really difficult to get back. Trust is broken. The organization is fundamentally different. What say to those founders and those sales leaders who are stuck in this weird tension between, we're doing it the expensive way, at least it feels like that, and what if this other new world doesn't work for us and we screw it up and now have to go and start again and lose a year of execution and high quality talent?
Yeah, so it's a really good point. I do feel like it's really easy for the founder to answer, like, is it working? If you've got an SDR team of 20 or 15 and they're delivering, then why would you change that? Yeah, if it's working and the business is growing. But I think fundamentally, if there's some underperformers, could you shrink the size of your team and add in automation to then get where you need to? But I think there's two things with AI. There's the productivity, everyone can see that. So I think you got to break it into two buckets. How can I do stuff quicker and faster? And what can I layer in to do that? And then this is the really interesting for me, is like SaaS, you could always say it's optional and where's the ROI, right? In any sort of tech, ultimately that's the reality. That's why it's not easy to sell it, even though it was for a period of time. But the thing is, can you start to just get outcomes from the data with generative AI so you can make informed decisions quicker and faster? So I think you should split those two things out and not worry so much about the cost saving, worry about what's working and say how much automation, because that's an easy thing to do. Like, am I making something more productive? Can we go a little bit faster? And then am I understanding more to make more informed decisions? Because I think, different tools will do different things for you. But obviously it sways much more on the productivity side right now and just time saving. But anything you can squeeze out of that, I think, goes back to the other point, is like, where you had two roles before, can it be one? That's not such a high risk as going, right, we're going to completely go AI SDRs and see if it actually works and try and build an AI agent on this tool that, might not be here or not tomorrow.
I think you make a really good point there, Tom. And I was at a pavilion last week hosting CROs, and it was really interesting to hear, I suppose, the mix in terms of adoption across these CROs. Some that are just like going all in, like experimenting with everything, like personally getting their hands really dirty in things like Clay and other tools, and but we're just highly skeptical about the ROI of those tools and the benefits. And maybe, as you say, maybe those people are the ones that have got a team that's fully functioning, that's working, and they're like, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And those that are really experimenting have got problems that they're trying to solve. But I think that the reality is somewhere in the middle. I'd love to hear from you, like, what are some of the best implementations that you've seen, or how can how can businesses implement AI and leverage it in a way that is most impactful for go-to-market teams?
Yeah, I think you've got to be careful, because some employees will love it and want to like dive into it. And others are just like, just make it work for me. I don't want to so like, if we're talking about salespeople generally, or even customer facing roles, and not everyone's going to want to do that. I think the biggest thing you get caught out, like, we know you don't get the same answer every time from AI, right? It's not completely perfect. So how are you making sure it's consistent? So like, one of the things that we did, and I don't often talk about ourselves on podcasts, but I think it's important, like, most people in our space, where you could prompt a call or a deal and go ask it something. But then if you think about the business, how helpful is that if every single random rep is just prompting anything they want? So we did it where you can save custom prompts, and then we teach our customers how to build a great prompt. So does it have the goal? What's the bulk of information you want? What do you want it not to send back? What do you want to do? So we teach them how to do it, and then you can share the prompts with a team or an individual. So then you're getting a consistent answer, whether you're looking for coaching feedback, someone to follow medic, do whatever. So I think in these early stages is just, how can you be consistent with it? Bit more like, don't make me think, just tell me the answer. It's kind of the philosophy we take. But yeah, we use Clay and stuff like that. And I think it's like that whole kind of world of, where we enriched some information from Zoom Info into Salesforce, and then we've got a lead list or whatever. I think how the exciting bit for that is is it more dynamic? Can it be enriched when you're asleep, like not doing anything? Can all of that happen faster? So I think they're all interesting stuff. So it's taking what you were doing originally and doing it in a faster, more effective way.
Tom, one of the things that, having worked for founders again and CEOs, I started to come under a lot of pressure when I was still in situ as an FT CMO about, there's not enough AI adoption in your team. We're behind. And again, it comes from hearing that one story that everybody repeats a lot, which is, Klarna no longer has any staff. They're amazing. They've saved millions of dollars in headcount and amplified their productivity by X, Y, or Z. The other thing that started to happen to us was, from the investor perspective, it became clear that we would not continue to get the kind of support we were enjoying before if we were not evidencing not just what was going to be AI in the product, but what was going to be AI in the go-to-market efficiency side of things. And both of those were just things that it's a change initiative that actually can be quite a heavy lift. So again, you guys were AI native, AI first, building the product, way before we even knew what was going on. What's your advice to those founders and GTM leaders who are listening?
I think pick someone in your team that's maybe really passionate about it and understands it and is invested in it, whether that be like someone in product, someone in engineering. We actually have someone in CS who's just like AI obsessed, and they build all our GPTs, and we have a business account, and we try and use it in an effective and consistent way, like even outside of the tech stack. So I think it's like anything, you need a couple of champions or people who are driving it through the business, like a little committee. So rather than everyone trying to do it and do a hackathon, I'm not sure that's the best use of time because not everyone's interested in kind of doing that anyway. And look, I think in answer to the question, most teams can be more efficient and can be changed in size, not in every business, but in a lot of businesses. So I would say, you can be blinkered as a founder, like especially when you're in it every day and you're operating and couldn't live without this person, but the reality is if you hold up a mirror and you think, well, if we had two people doing this, but they did it this way, would we get the same outcome? And that's where you got to remove the emotion from it and be able to take a hard look at it. Because sometimes the accountants are right. Not always, very often they're not. But sometimes they can be in terms of they're looking at all their portfolios and seeing some good stuff. So you should be open to that feedback and taking a harder look at your businesses, is trying to move the emotion from it, which isn't easy to do.
Yes. So interesting, Tom, you touched on that point about founders maybe being a bit blinkered and maybe holding on to people in the team too long. Just final on AI. I mean, we could talk about it for hours, I think, but what are you most excited about seeing in AI in the coming months or years? Where do you think it's heading? What are you excited about?
I think, like we said earlier, I think it's still early. I think, like, I'll go back to what I said again, sorry to repeat myself a bit, but I think getting outcomes from the data is key. So, for example, like one thing that we've done for customers is you can write a prompt on why you lose. So, like for years, you'll have a pick list that the AE fills in. And you could write pink blancmange on the top, and half of them would pick it. Like literally, and they're emotive about it, right? I didn't lose the deal. Oh, she ghosted me. So how do you take these things away from the team? One, because they don't like doing it, and two, so I think some of the day-to-day stuff that always has needed fixing can actually be solved. So like in something like Lost, you could have a cause and effect. So cause was product gap, went with X competitor. Now, if you can write a prompt and then it automatically runs that when you close Lost it and then updates the CRM automatically, it's not the, oh my God, we're building this AI agent, but it's a really great problem that needs solving. So when you run your enterprise close loss report at the end of the quarter, it's actually correct, and you can actually make some informed decisions. So we are looking at, on the innovation side, like, yeah, of course, we're got this vision for an AI agent go-to-marketplace where you can build an agent for CS. And we started work on that. So you can build like a workflow to do anything, because that is the way that people are going to want to use this data. And you're consolidating that from Slack because then you want every customer interaction too. But on the core functionality is like, right, how did you hear about us from a marketing perspective? Is the lead source correct? Is the handover good? Is the close loss good? Are the sales meeting notes accurate because of the way that the business likes to do it? So some of those core things we're trying to take, wow, the transcripts are really high quality now. The answers are really good. How do we almost like make it, this time I always talked about this in the early days, like a self-driving car. So in my world is like an AE shouldn't touch the CRM ultimately. What they don't like to, like, can ask Jiminny just power the CRM, basically, in the way that the business wants. And definitely one thing I've learned, and this is specific to me, is that I'd build a feature or a functionality or product, and customer would just like try and put them in a box. They just smash out of it. Like, there's a medic, or we do the D this way. And I was like, so one of the things is definitely like, let them, as much as you can, customize it to their business and do that. And I think generative AI gives you that opportunity, whereas you couldn't do that before. So I think it makes it hyper personalized and customized to the business, which is exciting.
Getting closer to that self-driving car, Tom. I love it.
Yeah, just not one that crashes, as I know now.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, what great insights you've given us. And, we're coming to the final stretch now. So I want to switch lanes a little bit and really talk about the ecosystem. And, you've been a player in the ecosystem for some time. And as a result, I imagine you have perspectives on what we all as practitioners could be doing differently or better. What would you like to see change about the startup ecosystem? And I'm particular about the UK in this question. And what would that be and why?
Going back to what we're talking about, founders making decisions, I think it's really hard when you're like pre-seed, pre-revenue, trying to go from seed to A. It's a really hard stage when people don't know who you are. Maybe, you've not built everything that's in the vision yet. But I do, applaud people to kind of think about the different options. There's not just one playbook to kind of grow and run your business, which is, I'll go do a seed round, go to a venture capital. Especially in Europe and the UK, it's very hard to grow a business as quick as it is out the US. So you go down that venture route, people can't go off. So I think maybe a lot of businesses don't succeed because they take the wrong path. Like, can they bootstrap? Can they get into the black? Can they take alternative funding like debt, or keep taking EIS and SEIS for a while, till their business is, 3, 4, 5, 10 million, and then take that capital later. So that's one thing I'd like to see change. I'd like to see businesses, especially now, they can be more efficient. Like, if I started Jiminny now, I could do it with like 1 or 2 engineers. I needed like 5 or 6. This fundamentally just tells you what's changed, so that's an exciting part too, that people got that opportunity. At the same time, you're going to be flooded with more companies doing more things. So again, you've got to cut through the noise.
Yeah, I completely agree with that non-linear path there, Tom. But this podcast is all about making the grade, which we define as successfully graduating from one funding round to the next, which actually quite rightly become increasingly harder in recent years as well. And we know the majority of startups still fail to do that, whether it be C to A or A to B. What do you think needs to happen to improve the graduation rates in startups? Those companies that are on that venture path, that do want to make it successfully from C to A or A to B, what do you think happened to improve the likelihood of doing that?
I think the graduation rate is like, everyone's probably does everything too quick and hires too fast and tries to nail it all overnight. And if you just had that little bit more patience, that's why second time founders are so successful, right? Because they know what they've done the other time. But if you just be that little bit more patient, so I'm going to do my B in another 18 months, unless you're, like you said earlier, when you're just the thing that is never been done before in a market that's just ripe for disrupting. Timing is always important anyway with anything. Then you should just be more calculated with how you plot your path from A to B, because, I think like every time like you go and make a hire that's wrong, it sets your business back. Just like recruiting is so important. You make the wrong exec hire, especially you put yourself back a year potentially. So just being that little bit more patient. If it takes me 3-4 months to find that leader instead of 1-2, I think you end up in a better result long term. With all this AI, you're only as good as the people that you have, and as good as your team.
I'm so glad you touched on the talent point. And, we were so delighted to be able to help you at Scalewise on both your marketing director hire and your COO hire, who I know have both worked out amazingly well for you. So thank you for providing that for us. I suppose we just want to wrap up with your biggest advice for founders looking to exit in 2025 and beyond. What's your one piece of advice for people looking to exit their business?
I think if you're in AI first company or a SaaS company adding AI, or you're one of these new AI startups, there's challenges in each of them. You know, the churn rates are high on some of these new AI products, AI products, some engineers switching around. There's no market that is completely brilliant, or piece of the market that's completely brilliant at the moment. I think we'll look back over like from 2020 to 2030 and go, that decade was fucking a shit show. Like, I think you will. So we've got another 4 or 5 years of it, from COVID through to everything that you know that's gone on with the world, right? I don't think we're through it. So if you can get your company profitable and you can get to reasonable growth rates, you can be in control. And that's one thing I'd say right now. Like, you can be in charge of your own destiny. If you keep trying to raise, do it the old way, I think, not saying you can't do it, but the risk will be much higher of you working it out.
Yeah, be in control of your own destiny. I think that is a great way to end today's podcast. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really to hear your story, from navigating to private equity exit, bootstrapping Jiminny, then raising capital. I think your journey is a bit of a masterclass actually in resilience and just hard graft. And what stood out to me is just how you've balanced your ambition, which you clearly have, but with, as you put it, running your own race and not getting too distracted by what others are doing. So thank you so much for coming on. I know our listeners are going to take away some powerful lessons. And so, yeah, thank you for being so generous with your time and your experience. And hopefully we'll get you on Making the Grade again for season 2, I'm sure. Thank you so much for listening to Making the Grade. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions following this episode, or you'd like to recommend a guest perhaps for our next season, please let us know at podcast@scalewise.com. And if you did enjoy today's episode, please do consider leaving us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'd really appreciate that. As this is a brand new show, reviews really help us spread the word and reach new listeners. Plus, we'd also love to hear what you're enjoying about our show. Thank you so much for your support, and see you soon for another episode of Making the Grade.